Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, 5 Easy Ways to Elevate Your Voice for Arizona's Children, Families, and Educators. We're going to spend some time together learning practical strategies, practical ways to engage in early childhood advocacy and connect with your elected officials. Now, one of the things, my name is Eric. I help lead the Arizona Association for the Education of Young Children, which is a state affiliate of the National Association for the Education of Young Children. We do the work of advancing equity in early childhood and advocating for worthy wages and public investments in the early childhood profession. One of the things that we're committed to is breaking down silos and inequitable barriers and building up bridges of collaboration. And so tonight's session is really a collaborative effort between multiple agencies that we want to just take a moment to acknowledge. The Arizona Association for the Education of Young Children, Arizona Early Childhood Education Association, the Arizona Head Start Association, Children's Action Alliance, Child and Family Resources, and who helps facilitate the Child Care Resource and Referral Network, Education Forward Arizona, First Things First, Register Her, the Southern Arizona Association for the Education of Young Children, and the United Way of Tucson and Southern Arizona. Our voices are powerful on their own individually. We have the power in our voices to vote for elected officials who support childcare. We have the power in our voices to tell our stories about our experiences and what we see and experience and know about child development in early care and education. No one can tell your story better than you. We have power in our individual voice, but we also have power in our collective voice. And so through this webinar, we're going to share some strategies that can help us all unify our messaging on behalf of children, families, and educators, and build our skills as champions, as advocates for young children in our communities and beyond. You can access the agenda, the resources, and the the presenter biographies at this link. That's bit.ly/060722 agenda. And we wanted to take a moment to thank our funders of this session. We are so grateful to offer this opportunity at no cost to early childhood educators, parents, and community champions, thanks to funding from the National Association for the Education of Young Children through a grant from the Heising-Simons Foundation. We're going to spend some time talking through what early childhood education looks like at the federal level, some recent investments over the period of the pandemic. We're going to talk about what the state of early childhood is in Arizona and what child care programs and families are facing, the challenges, the difficulties, and the successes over the past few years. Then we're going to share 5 concrete strategies that you can use tonight or tomorrow or in the next few weeks or in the next few months to re-engage in early childhood advocacy and be a champion for children and families. We'll dig into registering to vote and voting. We'll talk about how you can do your research and be an informed voter. We'll talk about how you can ask your candidates questions about early childhood, how you can host a site visit to your early care and education program, and how you can share your story to make your voice heard. We'll wrap up this session by sharing some ideas for taking action and for next steps, and then we'll let you know how to get a professional development certificate for this session by completing a brief survey at the end. When I was growing up, both of my parents served honorably in the United States Air Force, and so part of my context of being in a military family was learning that all of us are part of a community, that each of us contributes to the greater good of all of us. When one of us succeeds, all of us succeed. When all of us work together to make sure that all of us are successful, then our communities really are vibrant and can thrive. And so tonight, our big goal to share with you is to not think about the children in our communities as those children or their children or just our children. These are all of our children. These are all of Arizona's children. And it's our responsibility and obligation to ensure that we're setting them up for success now as young children and ensuring public investments that sustain their quality experiences even beyond early childhood education to help support them as lifelong learners. Over the past 2 years, it's been a significant challenge in our communities, but the hopeful news is because of the voices of early childhood educators and parents and community champions just like you, We advocated on behalf of children and families, and we asked for support and resources and investments in early care and education. And so over the past 2 years, through federal relief funds, the United States has invested nearly $53 billion in early care and education and childcare to help childcare providers survive during the pandemic. So I'm going to turn it over to Barbie. She's going to talk us through, well, what does that actually look like at the federal level and how have those investments been used to support programs in our communities. So Barbie, do you want to take it away?
Sure, thanks, Derek. Hi, everyone. My name is Barbie Prinster. I am the Executive Director with the Arizona Early Childhood Education Association. Thank you for joining us this evening. So just a quick federal overview of what the funding looks like that Arizona has received in the last 2 years. In December of 2020, President Trump signed in the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which consisted of about $248 million for Arizona, and then $956 million were allocated to the American Rescue Plan that was signed by President Biden in March of 2021. Out of that 956 million, 600 million of that funding, it was earmarked for stabilization grants, which are currently going on that we'll talk about here briefly in just a minute. And then 356 million in continued CCDF, or the Child Care Development Block Grant funding was already flowing through. It was just a significant increase in that funding. So it's about a total of $1.3 billion for our state, which is fantastic. So with that funding, here are some high-level things that there are other things that have been used for this, but these are kind of taking up the larger chunks of the funding. One of the first things that happened this year when providers re-signed their contracts with the Department of Economic Security, increase in provider reimbursement rates finally went to the 2018 market rate survey. The reimbursement rates are based on either the 50th percentile or the 75th percentile, depending on the population of children that you're serving. DCS children are being paid at the 75th percentile along with all of infants and toddlers. And then children that are in the low-income working bucket are at the 50th percentile or coming in off of TANF. There is also a 35% quality incentive, which affects people that are a provider that is currently a 3, 4, 5-star, or they're accredited. And we used to have a tiered reimbursement system that was, we got that through the legislature in 2016. And so this is significantly higher than that amount. So this is also helping as well. There's been money for expansion of Quality First programs. Several regional councils had long wait lists for people to be able to participate. So this is really exciting to be able to expand that system and that program for providers. Child care stabilization grants, which were first announced last year in August of 2021. Those are still continuing. They will continue till June of 2023. And then the recently announced workforce amount, which is a significant increase in your stabilization grant. You do have to fill out a form online to be able to participate in this and agree that this new amount, this new addition will go specifically to wages and benefits for your current workforce to help with retention and benefits and specific wage increases. There have been some preschool and literacy grants that have been enacted through the Department of Education. And then Eric's association, AzAEYC, has a really great Arizona Toolkit subscriptions that have been funded too. This is just a light touch of some of the more important things. That's not touching on everything, but those are kind of a brief overview. So what are we looking forward to? So Build Back Better had some significant pieces for childcare and for preschool funding, universal preschool, and then really Senator Manchin kind of put the fork in Build Back Better as we know it. So Senator Murray and Senator Kane are working on this childcare and preschool reconciliation proposal to be introduced as in the reconciliation budget package. And some of the things that it does is really exciting. First of all, the most important part of this is that this funding would now all come through the Child Care Development Block Grant funding through DES, just like it currently is. The Build Back Better program was an opt-in option for states. And so that's where our concern was, is that we would create more of the haves and the have-nots when it comes to states being able to participate. Other states might not, then it might go to the city and town community level. So those are really not an equitable way of doing childcare in our country. And so this proposal really stops that from happening, and all of the states would be able to participate. Now, there are certain parts of this program that is not necessarily an opt-in, but there is a state kind of federal match to it. We'll get into that in just a second. So what this does is it triples the existing Child Care and Development Block Grant to increase funds to all states. And that funding is about $72 billion worth of funding over the next 6 years. That would be able to provide subsidies to more low-income working families and also raise subsidy payments. One of the other things is to use this CDBG to fund supply and compensation grants to all states to expand child care supply, improve facilities, raise compensation for early childhood educators. So this when it says compensation grants, it would probably look something familiar to what this current stabilization grant is that is happening right now. And then providers are just making sure that they're following all of the guidelines and to retain and recruit employees and be able to compensate them better, offer them better benefits, all of those really important things to have a quality workforce. And then the piloting a child care and development expansion program for 6 years. This is the part where this would raise eligibility for families earning up to 250% of the SMI, which is the state median income. Right now, we're at 165% of the federal poverty level. And with our continuous minimum wage going up statewide, we're going to hit a point where we're not being able to serve families, but just because they're making 50 cents more, $1 more an hour does not mean that they can still afford childcare. So eligibility is going to be a really important piece, not only moving forward, but I think as from a state level initiative that we're going to be talking about. This piece, this piloting this child care and development expansion program, is also the federal state cost sharing mechanism. So the federal government would cover about 90% of all that cost, and then the state would have to chip in the 10%. So this is something where we would have to actually invest in childcare, which we currently don't, except for the small, minute money of what we put into the Department of Child Safety. And then investing in high quality preschool grants. This provides grants to establish and expand high quality preschool programs for 3- and 4-year-olds. So it kind of is like a universal preschool program, but either state would be able to decide what it looks like and who is eligible and things like that. Also, one of the other things too that I wanted to mention, and I must have forgot this bullet point, is that it invests in raising wages for Head Start teachers. And that's about $12 billion in new funding for over the next 6 years as well. So there's some really exciting stuff. I know that Eric and all the rest of our friends are going to talk about how to engage with our legislators and our senators, but feel free to send your senator a message and say that we need to do something about childcare and preschool to continue on and do some of this great work. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbie. And we just want to reiterate that this is a proposal, right? It's still in negotiations in the federal Congress. But just imagine,
yes.
You know, if we were to use our voices to all come together and advocate to ask for those investments to really ensure that families could have affordable, accessible, equitable early care and education, and so that educators could be paid a worthy wage for the complex and important work that they do. This funding and funding like this could help sustain quality experiences for young children across our nation and in our communities here in Arizona. So we do encourage you to take everything you'll learn from tonight's session, the 5 tips that we'll share, to go out and ask for not only these sustained federal investments in early care and education, but also in state investments in early care and education. So with that note, I'm going to turn it over to Liz Barker-Alvarez to talk a little bit about what does early care and education look like here in Arizona. Liz?
Thank you, Eric. And let me know if I'm going too fast. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm Liz Barker Alvarez, Chief Policy Advisor at First Things First. First Things First is Arizona's state agency dedicated solely to the education and health of Arizona's youngest children, birth to 5 years old. We're one partner in a huge system that supports young children, and we're proud to partner with organizations like the Associations for the Education of Young Children to ensure that all Arizonans have an opportunity to show their support for young children. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the state of early childhood education in Arizona. It's really important because we talk a lot about the childcare crisis, that we realize that Arizona's childcare environment was in crisis before the pandemic. We had, prior to the pandemic, half of Arizona was what was called a childcare desert. That means that in census blocks where there were 50 or more young children, there was not a single childcare slot, or there were 3 times as many children for every single childcare slot that was available. So that was half of all of Arizona. So parents didn't have a lot of options, and our workforce was not well compensated, and our reimbursement rates were not where they needed to be. The pandemic only exacerbated those problems. So when the pandemic hit and the shutdown was ordered, half of the programs in Arizona basically closed down, and thousands of jobs were lost. In initial estimates at the national level, as much as a third of the childcare workforce lost their jobs. It's over 370,000 jobs. And in a study done in the middle of last year, really the childcare workforce was only up to 87% of what it was before the pandemic. So that's still down 13% of the jobs we had prior to the pandemic. So when we had the pandemic, there was an immediate response, right? I mean, there was shortages of supplies, there were shortages of cleaning supplies, safety supplies like face masks, et cetera. And there wasn't a lot happening with the government initially. And so the community responded, whether that was philanthropic organizations, hospitals, schools that were closed down that didn't need their supplies. They really, came out, and then folks, Barbie and Eric, I think were among them, just got supplies in their cars, and they ran out and they distributed them. Thankfully, then there was a formal response in terms of the establishment of the Arizona Healthy Childcare Helpline. So that's where providers could call up and get advice on how to implement some of the CDC guidelines related to serving children safely. And then, of course, there was a federal and state response, mostly from the feds. The Department of Economic Security maintained their payments for childcare subsidy, and First Things First maintained its payments for childcare scholarships so that providers could have those resources and have those slots available as children started to come back into those childcare environments. Some initial federal relief in the summer of 2020 was used to establish enrichment centers, again, funds to keep childcare centers open so that they would be available to families that were still working, especially the families of essential workers. They also established the Essential Worker Scholarship Program so that firefighters and police officers and medical personnel, et cetera, and childcare providers would have access to childcare so they could continue to doing the very vital jobs that they were all doing. Later on in the fall of 2020 was when there were some short-term stability grants just for the summer to get folks through. And in late summer 2021, there were also some grants to help with workforce recruitment and retention. And that was all in that kind of initial pandemic timeframe. Next slide. I'm not going to go over this because Barbie already covered it, but there were 2 additional relief packages that were passed, and they funded a variety of different measures that are continuing to support the childcare industry as well as our childcare workforce. It's getting cut off in the slide, but I do need to point out that the majority of these relief efforts end by 2023, 2024. So while everyone appreciates this funding, it is important to note that all of the efforts that Barbie referred to earlier will end in 2023, 2024, unless additional funding comes from the federal government as well as our state government. So challenges remained, as we said, thousands of jobs were lost during the pandemic. Initially, many workers did not return due to the fact that they had to support their own children in online learning, or they had personal or family health problems that prevented them from coming back, or quite frankly, for some, unemployment actually paid them more than their jobs did, which is a sad commentary on what our essential childcare workforce was earning. Now, the childcare workforce crisis is actually caused by a different dilemma, and that's that our providers can't compete with the wages that are being paid by other industries where the benefits are better and the work is easier. Some examples are that, Target pays for college scholarships for many of its workers, or as one childcare employee who unfortunately left the field pointed out, she could make more stacking boxes at Walmart than she could in her childcare job, which again, what a sad commentary. In the fall of 2021, the National Association for the Education of Young Children did a survey of providers, and they found that they're operating at about 73% of their license capacity, which that's just how many kids you have kind of enrolled. On a day-to-day basis, only about 39% of the kids are actually coming to care. And so that makes it very hard for providers to be able to, afford to stay open when you're not enrolling kids at 100% and you're not actually having kids show up at 100% of your rate. So when asked, like, what is causing this, 84% of providers said they were experiencing staffing shortages. And you can all see from a slide that how they are dealing with that workforce crisis. Either they're serving fewer children, they have longer wait lists, they're not opening classrooms, or they've reduced their operating hours. And all of these have a serious impact on our families. Very concerning also is that about 61% of the respondents indicated that they plan to leave their program or close their program within the next year. So obviously something has to be done to provide some more long-term support to our childcare industry. What does this mean from a family perspective? So from a family expense perspective, childcare in Arizona was already expensive. You can see right there that the cost of infant care rivals what folks are paying for housing right now on an annual basis. And the cost for a preschooler is just under what we pay for college in this state. Now, this is in addition to the rising costs that families face for their basic necessities in areas like food and gas and utilities. And so what does that mean for a working family? Because, a lot of times we see those, but we're saying, like, what does that actually mean in terms of dollars and cents? Okay, so a family that earns our state median income, which is about a little over $55,000 a year, if they had just an infant, they would need to pay 20% of their income for care for that infant. If they had an infant and a preschooler, it would probably be about 35% of their income. A family earning the minimum wage, which unfortunately is many of our childcare workforce, would spend 44% of their income on infant care, and with an infant and a preschooler, 78% of income, which is ludicrous. As Barbie mentioned, there are assistance programs to help, but initial eligibility is limited to between 165 and 200% of the federal poverty level, which is, you can see the figures there, between about $44,000 to about $54,000. So that's the initial eligibility. And so what happens is that many working families, they don't qualify for the assistance programs, but they don't really make enough to afford childcare. And this really puts them in a tough bind. I think another aspect of the challenges that remain that often doesn't get talked about is just there is a growing awareness, but a prior lack of awareness of the really crucial role that early learning plays, both for economic development and for education. And fortunately, a recent U.S. Chamber Foundation study actually was able to quantify what the childcare crisis means to Arizona business. So they surveyed folks in Arizona, and 77% of the parents who responded reported that they missed work in the past 3 months due to childcare issues, and 6% actually left the job voluntarily because they just didn't have childcare. What does that mean for industry? That's a $1.7 billion annual loss to the Arizona economy, including employers losing about $1.4 billion because of absences and turnover, and the state losing $348 million in tax revenue due to childcare. Because when people can't work, they don't have any money. And when they don't have any money, they can't buy goods and services, which are taxed. So it really is having a huge impact on our economy. The other challenge, which we'll probably see a lot more as the years go on, is the education perspective, because we know that gaps in kids' vocabulary start to appear as young as 18 months. When they get to be in third grade, those gaps, if they're not addressed, turn into challenges with reading comprehension, and third grade reading ability is a predictor of high school graduation. So these kids who have had their early learning experience interrupted by COVID, have not been able to access early learning. Many of them are going to enter school not prepared, and they're going to have these challenges as time walks on. So I think all of this, what providers are going through, what our families are going through, and what the childcare crisis is doing to our economy and our education system, all point to the need for all of us to engage more in building awareness among our policymakers on why it is so important that we invest in our youngest children and in the caregivers who serve them.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz, for sharing that context. So now we'd like to share with you 5 easy, concrete, practical ways that you can make your voice heard for children and families through early childhood advocacy. We're very, very excited to welcome our next special guest. Her name is Rachel Jeck. She's with the organization Register Her, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how we can register to vote, some important upcoming dates, and why our vote matters to help advance equity for early childhood. So Rachel, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thank you so much. Really glad to be here and listening to all of these statistics. Certainly challenging times and can be depressing, but it reinforces for me why the power of voting is so important, because I think that if we can start to elect legislators who understand that our children are our future and that we need to invest in them, we have some hope that there will be better budgets and better funds allocated for their education. So at Register Her, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We focus primarily on women, and I'll actually talk about that real quickly at the end of the presentation. First, I want to talk to you more generally about voting and how maybe to have conversations with staff and the families that you serve about voting and why it's important to participate in this process. So from where we sit, we believe that voting is the best tool for bringing about long-lasting change to communities. Voting means having a say in the way that resources are allocated. I think a lot of times people, particularly in underserved communities, think that voting and somehow the whole electoral process doesn't apply to them. And it's important to spend some time educating people who haven't been talked to about voting, who never had the benefit of a civics education in school, and to talk to them about how voting is also really about electing people who will decide how very limited resources are allocated in a community. We believe that if we want to become a society that values equity and representation, that we have to vote for it. And voting can put people in office who represent the diversity of our communities. You know, they say you have to see it to be it. And I do believe that. Voting certainly advances this association's core beliefs of equality and equity and opportunity. And that's really what democracy is all about. And it's making sure that everyone has a voice and that voice is counted. I know those are kind of lofty principles and ideas, but if you distill it to even its more kind of basic and in terms of talking to real people, voting gives us a say in laws that affect our families and our community. People in office, from school boards to city council, make decisions every single day that impact your life, and voting is a chance for you to have a say. Voting brings us all together as proud Americans. It doesn't belong to one party or the other, and it doesn't matter if you're young or old or rich or poor or white or black or brown. Every single vote counts equally. It really is the great equalizer in our society. We must elect leaders who will lift up our communities And I always like to say that you can't really complain about the way things are going if we don't stand up and make sure that our voices are heard and participate in the process. A little bit specifically about the landscape in Arizona. And by the way, I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. My family is still in Arizona. So I'm a proud Arizonan and very emotionally invested in what happens to the families that live in Arizona. So Arizona has a population, and these statistics are from about, they're from US Census and other reputable sources, and they come from kind of 2020-21. But at that point, Arizona has a population of 7.15 million with 4.3 million registered voters in July 2021. So if you take out the eligible unregistered voters, again, those are going to be people 18 and above, that takes you to 1.3 million. And since 50.3% of the Arizona population is female, that leaves us with roughly 654,000 unregistered but eligible women who are not voting. So who is eligible in Arizona to vote? You have to be a citizen of the United States. You have to be a resident of Arizona and in your county for at least 29 days before the next election, the one that you want to vote in. You have to be 18 years or old before the next general election. So that means even if you're not 18 in time for a primary, you can still vote if you'll be 18 in time for the next general election. And then the last two, you can't have been convicted of a treason or a felony unless you've had your civil rights restored, and you can't be declared currently an incapacitated person by the court. The Arizona primary is Tuesday, August 2nd, which means that the deadline for registering to vote is Tuesday, July 5th. And as many of you may know, Arizona has an option for people to join a permanent absentee early voting list or request a ballot by mail. And that date for doing that is Friday, July 22nd. So people can register. And we always recommend that when they register in Arizona, that they register at that time for their absentee ballot or put themselves on the AVL list, the permanent absentee list, because you can always go and vote in person if you don't want to turn it in early, but things happen, jobs come up, kids get sick, you have to pull an extra shift you're not expecting, whatever it is. And so it's a much more reliable way to make sure that people get to the polls. The general election is Tuesday, November 8th. So the deadline to register to vote for that is October 11th. And again, there's a deadline that we highlighted for requesting to be an early absentee voter. Okay. So registering to vote, at Register Her, we register primarily women to vote. Again, that's our focus. We have a QR code, which is featured here. Any of you are welcome to use it, share it, scan it. It makes it really easy. It brings people to the page that's pictured on the left. It is available. That page is bilingual, so people can register in either English or in Spanish. All they have to do is put in their state, which in this case will be Arizona, and it takes them it asks them just a couple questions and then takes them directly to the Secretary of State page and helps them register. So at Register Her, our mission is to register and activate women voters, especially those who are women of color and in underrepresented communities. I shared with you the statistic in Arizona, but it is the case in most states across the nation that hundreds of thousands of women in each state, which means millions of women across the country, are eligible but not registering to vote. We know from social science research that women are more likely to vote for other women. We also know that women legislate more and get more done, and that they work more across the aisle and are interested in just seeing laws passed. So there are great benefits from having more women participate in our electoral system, not to mention that it will lead to greater equity and representation. And with that, I'm just going to share with you, we have a short video that we prepared that kind of talks about Register and who we are. And just so you know, all of the women who are speaking in this video, including me, but all of them are part of the Register Her team. They're either, a couple of them are board members, but many of them are our young female organizers who work for Register Her, and we pay all of our organizers. We do not ask them to do it on a volunteer basis. We pay them because we believe in the economic empowerment of the communities that they represent. We pay them above minimum wage, and we believe that it's very important to support this work, that it's critical work, and you're going to hear from a few of them in this video. So thanks, Eric.
Voting is our voice.
Voting is how we are heard.
Voting is essential to participate in democracy.
As we've seen in our most recent major elections, the candidates who women choose are the candidates who win.
Yet the power of the woman voter,
Our power.
has vast untapped potential.
Because many women, especially in marginalized communities, are not registered.
Disenfranchised.
Not heard.
We know that women, by definition, are the largest segment of our population ever to be disenfranchised.
But together, we can register and activate her.
Register her.
Activate her.
Because it's not just registering her.
It's activating her so she knows how essential she is to our democracy.
Because it helps advocate for yourself and your community.
Our fundamental rights are under attack. We must vote to protect them.
It's activating her with the tools to vote correctly.
To jump over the hurdles they put up to block her.
To ensure her vote is counted.
If voter registration wasn't something that was important, I don't think there would be voter suppression efforts to stop people from just registering.
Every woman deserves to be heard at the ballot box.
To ensure a just representation in government.
When more women vote, outcomes are changed.
It is one of the most effective ways common people like myself can combat inequality and oppression.
And women choose women.
And with more women representing us, our issues are heard.
I'm registering women to protect our right to decide what's best for our bodies and our future.
I believe voting rights are the basis of our democracy.
Register Her harnesses the data.
Identifies the communities.
This is where Register Her has got it down, looking at those folks that are disenfranchised.
Finds and activates the untapped potential of our sisters out there, the ones waiting to be heard.
Join us, and together,
we can register her and change America.
for a better America.
You may have noticed, or January Contreras, who's from Arizona, who has been a wonderful supporter of Register Her. I know she's now in Washington, but I got to know her when she was in Arizona. I certainly appreciate the chance to come and talk to you tonight about voting, and I wish all of you lots of success in the important work that you're doing.
I appreciate the focus on equity in terms of voting and ensuring that all of us early childhood educators, the parents that we serve, our community members, all of us, all of our votes and voices are important. So we need to continue to lift each other up and ensure that our elected officials are thinking about, talking about, and learning about childcare and early care and education and why it's so important for the children, families, and for all of us in our communities. So it is my pleasure to turn it over to our next speaker.
So my name is Donna Davis, and I am with Education Forward Arizona. We are a brand new organization that started last August, and we are a combination of Expect More Arizona, College Success Arizona, and Achieve 60 Arizona. We are an education advocacy organization. We cover the whole state. And we also cover the whole education continuum from preschool through university. So what I wanted to share with you tonight is who you're supposed to connect with to make these wonderful changes, because our legislative and congressional districts have been redrawn after the census in 2020. So every 10 years after the census, Arizona has an independent redistricting commission that's made up of 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and an independent that redraws our districts, both our state districts and our federal districts. So this is going to change. It definitely changed who I'm voting for. It changed both my congressman and my state legislators. So it probably will change who you're going to have to communicate with going forward as well. There are a few ways for you to figure out who your new representatives are. Well, if you go to the Clean Elections website, which is azcleanelections.gov. There's a place in there where you can type in your address, and it will tell you what your new district is. Right there is where you type in, and there's when you go to voter dashboard, that's where you type in your address, and then it will bring up your legislative districts and who your new people are. So these are my people. I moved from District 8 as my congressional district to District 9. I moved from District 13 at the state level to District 29. And the Board of Supervisors, our county district my county district remained the same. And I'm not sure how many of those even changed, but I know that the state and congressional districts changed a lot. So this page will give you the list of which districts you are in. The other thing you should know is that you can, on this Clean Elections page, when you're on My Voting Dashboard, you can go to the place called What's on My Ballot, and you can put, which is not shown here because I didn't know about it until after I submitted these slides to Eric. But there's a place on the My Voting Dashboard where it says What's on My Ballot. And in that, when you click on there, you can pull up all of your candidates and get information about all of them, from president down to, your city council. But not having that information before, the other way you can get to this information is through the Secretary of State's office. And so that's what I did for this slide. I went to the Secretary of State's office, put in my district numbers, and this is what came up. And it gave me a whole list of who my candidates are for all the offices. And there's a place at the top where it says view more information or something like that. And you will get the candidate's website. You'll get information about them. So it's very good for you to learn about your candidates and to communicate with them and let them know that you are an early childhood advocate. And if they have any questions about early childhood, that they should reach out to you so that you become their early childhood expert. So here's the Secretary of State's website to find your candidates. Once you figure out what district you're in, you have to have your district numbers to go into the Secretary of State's website to find your candidates. But the Clean Elections website that's shown here is where you go to figure out which district you're in. And once again, you can go in there and go into What's on My Ballot and find your list of candidates there as well, with a place where you can click to get more information and get their websites and information about how to contact them. And then AzAEYC also has a lot of resources, and so does AzAEYC have a lot of resources as well for you to check in with your elected officials about early education. So that's what I have.
Great, thank you so much, Donna. And I think the important piece is to know who those elected officials are, and especially around this time when there's the primary election as well as the general election, getting to know the people who are running for candidacy in your community, asking them about what they're looking to do to support childcare, children and families in your community, doing that research to really understand why they deserve your vote, and making sure that they are prioritizing support for early care and education. So we're going to turn it over to Monica, who's going to tell us a little bit about, well, how do we do that? Like, what kinds of things should we talk with our candidates about in terms of early childhood education? So Monica, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So good evening, everyone. My name is Monica Brinkerhoff. I am the Associate Vice President for Early Childhood Education at United Way of Tucson and Southern Arizona. And it really is exciting to be with you all tonight to talk about one of my favorite things, which is advocacy. Just a little about me. I also have my whole career has been in early childhood, and I've always been really passionate about advocacy. And one of the things I learned early on in my career was that our lawmakers are really just people. So I used to think that they were kind of these mystical creatures, and I was, and they were intimidating and they, all the things. And, after doing lots of visits and getting to know them, I learned that really they're just people. So really just, it's about relationships. So advocacy is really just all about relationships. It's about making a connection that's meaningful to the lawmaker, and helping him or her care about what your cause is. And so in our case, it's early childhood education. And this is really geared more toward, after the lawmakers are in office and you're setting up either visits or you're inviting them to site visits, or as Donna said, reaching out to them to be sure that they consider you to be the experts in the field, because we are the experts about what we do. So in order to kind of get the lawmaker to care about your cause, you have to understand a little bit about him or her. Really, this is no different than making a new friend. So if you think about the things you might want to do if you were going to get to know someone better, well, you might Google their name, or you might do a little research on social media. You might try to learn about what their interests are. You might see what things you both have in common. So you can use a similar approach with lawmakers, remembering that they're people too. Before you reach out with them, to a meeting or a site visit, see what you're able to learn about what your interests are. And then that way you can tailor your comments, your questions, your stories to the things that interest them. And then this can also help you be more prepared for questions they might have for you during a visit. So we already looked at the little slide with the owl, but do your research. So look at what was their work experience, what other community service did they do, committees that they might have served or might be serving on, and then this in their social media page. So in general, some questions that you might think about asking, and just kind of in general, and then actually I thought we might have some time to practice and try it out a little bit. Just some questions in general, like what do you already know about early childhood in your community? What do you remember from your own child when you were a child? Why do you think investing in early childhood is important? What have you heard from your constituents about childcare and early childhood? Now here I want to say it is obviously important to kind of do a little research beforehand and make sure that the question is right for your legislator, because not everyone will be able to say why they think investing is important. So you might have to say that and lead them into why they think it should be important. We just heard some really amazing talking points and data points from Liz. She highlighted a lot of the really, I think, important things that, the data behind why investing in early childhood is so important. But, I kind of just synthesized it really simply on this slide. It's investing in high quality early care and education is good for individual children. And so I think we in our field, we know it's good for kindergarten readiness and children's individual development. We know that when they're in high quality settings and it's more likely that we can identify any issues that might be happening, so we can help them support their development early on, and it's critical for their future success. We know that high quality early care and education is good for parents. It helps them stay in the workforce, it helps them learn about their children's development, and finally it helps society preparing for the future workforce, remembering that childcare centers, providers are often small business owners, and so that's a critical aspect of the economy. And then finally, the return on investment. So what I thought we could do next, if we can go to the next slide, is we'll just practice a little bit. So these are a few lawmakers that I pulled from our state legislative website, and so I put the little link in the bottom from where I got the information. So here, these are real people. And so what I thought we might do, and I might call on my fellow panelists here, because it might be hard for the audience to unmute. But what I'd like to do is we'll read about Representative Butler, and then we might ask, then I'll have you tell me what you think some talking points or questions you might ask this representative if you were in a visit with her. So she is District 28. She's a small business owner. She studied elementary education. She worked in real estate and healthcare while she helped her support her husband through dental school. She experienced our economic downturn from a small business owner's perspective. She's interested in education policy, and she's the parent of 2 boys. And the committee she's on are banking and insurance and health. So let me pause and ask the audience or the panelists, what questions might you ask based on what you know about Representative Butler? And what are some talking points that you think might be the most relevant?
Can I go, Monica?
Yeah, go for it.
So Representative Kelly Butler is actually my representative in the community that I live in. I'm in Legislative District 28. And so I spent a lot of my time researching, looking at the issues that she votes on or votes against, spending time. We actually sent her a children's artwork like the one I have behind me of cactus that was painted at a local preschool program in her community as part of our Early Childhood Day at the Capitol this year, just to thank her for her continued service and for meeting with us as educators. So I'm very familiar. I've done my research. She is a champion for children. So talking with her, it's not a big sell. It's not a hard sell. And so oftentimes what I would say is, Representative Butler, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the bills you're looking at co-sponsoring to support childcare in Legislative District 28? If I were to invite her to my to a childcare program I work with, I might ask her to spend some time visiting in the classrooms, maybe reading a book to the children, but then also schedule some time for my staff to be able to talk to her about the challenges of trying to work in early care and education, also try to afford childcare for their own children, and then just the benefits that investments in childcare would make for all of our educators to be paid a worthy wage. So I think with this particular representative, she's very supportive of early care and education and understands, as an elementary education major, she understands how that supports lifelong success. So those are some of the strategies I've used before, and I often will email her in support of, asking her to support bills related to children and families. Does that help?
Yes, and that's perfect because this was, it was totally a random. I just randomly pulled a few off the website, and so it just happened that this was Eric's. But Eric, what I loved about what you said is you emphasized both the education part to speak to her background, but also talked about childcare and then how it can be kind of tricky to work and provide find childcare for your own children. So that was great. You spoke to some of her own life experience. Okay, so here's another one, Representative Care, and her district has rural and agricultural areas. Has 3 of the 6 military installations in the state. She has a 4-generation dairy farm, 4 adult children and 11 grandchildren. She's been on several committees, as you can see there on the slide, and passion as a small business and dairy farm owner that serves her well on the Senate committees, which she's on. So again, this is just information that's taken from the our state legislature website. So all you need to do is Google the person's name and all the information comes up. So let's see, I'll just invite, what questions based on what you know about Senator Kerr or Representative Senator Kerr, what questions might you ask, or what talking points might be most relevant for her?
Monica, it's Donna, and actually Senator Kerr is my senator.
Perfect.
So, I know that she has 4 adult children and 11 grandchildren, and she's passionate about them. And I believe that at least 2 of her children, adult children, are teachers. So that gave us something in common to talk about. And she is a dairy farmer, and I used to work for the Future Farmers of America. So, we kind of had that in common as well. But I agree with what you said in the beginning. Getting to know them as a person is really important. And during the pandemic, Our organization will go down to the Capitol and sign people up for the request to speak system. And we couldn't get in there because it was all locked up. And so Senator Kerr came to a leadership thing that I was a part of. And actually, she was a past graduate of that leadership class. And I expressed my concern that people couldn't get in there to sign up for request to speak. So she actually, like 3 times, made arrangements for her staff person to meet me in the lobby to let me in so I could sign people up for request to speak. But that would not have happened if I did not, start a relationship with her. And that started by going to I went to some of her fundraisers, just so that I could get in front of her and get to know who she was. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Thank you, Donna. Yeah, so I love how you emphasized really like showing up for her events. It is about building a relationship. And I think sometimes it can be, I know it was for me, less intimidating when I thought of it as, oh, okay, this is kind of like if you were going to try to make a new friend with someone, you go to the parties that they host and you take some time to get to know what they like and how many children they have, and then think about things that you have in common. So yeah, thank you for that. Okay, let's try one more. So this is Senator Steele. She is her occupation, again, from the website, coaching, counseling, and public speaking. As a Seneca Mingo, if she's Indigenous, she's a powerful advocate for addressing climate change and ending violence against women and children, dedicated to protecting the environment, helping victims of sexual assault, incest, child abuse, and domestic violence. She has a master's in counseling psychology and a 25-year career as a television and radio newscaster. And you can see her committees there. So I'll pause and see if there's any of our panelists or anyone in the audience to kind of give us some ideas of questions or talking points that might connect with Senator Steele.
Monica, it's Donna again, but I thought of something else. I don't really know Senator Steele, but I think it's really, really, really important for us to thank them for serving, thank them if they passed a bill that we were in support of, that kind of thing, because that opens doors as well. So be sure to thank them.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. Yeah, that's another thing about keeping relationships, right? And keeping friendships healthy and strong is showing gratitude. So yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that was all I had. And hopefully, I think my main point was just to try to remember it's our lawmakers work for us. And so that's oh, Liz, did you have to have something to add?
Just a real quick point there, Monica, that I know sometimes we do this every day, and sometimes it can be a little bit intimidating for folks. What do I say? I just want to remind folks that Barbie, Eric, myself, our friends at Children's Action Alliance, like Kylie, we do this every day. So if you want to call one of us or email one of us at our organizations to say, hey, I'm meeting with this person. Is there anything that I should really know or stress, et cetera? Or a little nervous about it. Can you help me out, Donna? This is literally what we do all day. And we know it can be intimidating, but elected officials love to hear from the people in their district. They don't like to hear the paid people like us, although they do meet with us and they listen to us sometimes, but they really want to hear from their constituents. We don't want fear or doubts to keep somebody from communicating with their policymakers. So if you reach out to one or several of us, one of us will probably return your call and say, this is what I know about them. This is what I recommend. So I hope that doesn't put people off because it is a lot of information, but a lot of us know this already. We know the policymakers already. So just wanted to put that out.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Monica. I really appreciate you bringing up that they are people like you and me. They live in our district. They often work in the district that they serve. And so they're people like any of us. In those relationships, I think anyone who works with children, early educators, family childcare providers, parents, we all know that relationships are at the heart of the work we do. So giving that, having that lens of knowing this is about building a reciprocal relationship, right? They work for us, our taxpayer dollars pay for their salaries. And so we expect their support on the issues that are important to us. So thank you so much for sharing those insights. We're going to turn it over to Jessica. She's going to talk us through what we could do to get the candidate or the elected official into our early learning environment to show off the important work that we do in early childhood education. So whether you're an early childhood educator, a family childhood educator, maybe you're a parent at an early childhood program, these are some tips to help you host a site visit. So Jessica, you want to take it away?
Thank you, Eric. My name is Jessica Rivera Garcia, and I'm the Arizona AZHSA Association Director. And thank you all of you for tuning in to this webinar. I'm really glad that you're here. So like Eric said, we're gonna just talk a couple of minutes on tips and tricks and ideas that you can do to host a site visit. Like my colleague Donna said, make sure that you look up the people that represent your district. As well as you can contact their staff by phone or email and make an invitation. I know that a couple of our colleagues share some website that you can look up your representative and then make sure in there you can see their email and phone number. Also make sure that when you are writing the invitation, you state, your program name, who you are, if you're the director of that program, if you're a manager of the program, and then where is your program located at? What is the district that the program is at? This is important because it shows to the representative that you are not going to waste their time. They're going to be able to go to their community that they serve. Is when you do the invitation, either by phone or by email, make sure that you give them a reason as to why are you inviting them. It can be that you're opening a new center. It can be that you have a new playground that you want them to see, that you have new staff, or you have staff that are willing to do the advocacy. As well as maybe families. Maybe you want to have a group of parents that want to meet their representative on their community. So just make sure that you give a reason and also be creative. If you want to add a couple of pictures in that invitation, you can go ahead and do so. Once you get a confirmation of the visit, you can feel free to do a press release. Just make sure that the staffer who is scheduling this visit is aware and gives you permission. Sometimes our representatives, they like to bring their own media instead of others. So just make sure that you clarify that with the staffer who is scheduling the visit. The other thing as well, is that, just a little thing is that once you invite the media, this can be as a support for the representative. So it just depends how the representative is feeling at that moment and what bill they're passing and all that fun stuff. Also, let the staffer know who is the representative meeting with. So, they don't like surprises the day of. They like to be prepared and they like to have an agenda. So if you're planning on having the legislator come to your center and speak with parents, just let the staffer know that that's going to be part of the visit. As well as they want to meet with staff or just a day to just be in the classroom with the children. Just make sure that you let them know that. Also, just keep in mind that if you're going to have the media come or even the legislator, sometimes they like to take pictures to put on their website. If there are any photo release restriction on your center or the classroom that they're visiting, make sure that you let the staffer know as well as the media. So now we are on the visit. So like our colleague has said, make sure that you do your research ahead of time. This is very important because like I shared, they don't like surprises. So make sure that you do your research, you know what committees they're standing for, what do they support. So that way you have that prepared the day of. Make sure your staff and family knows that you're gonna have legislator visit your center. Just because, some people may not have that experience of meeting a legislator and they might get nervous when they meet them, as well as families. So just make sure that you let your community know. Another idea that we have done in the past is have a folder ready for your staff that is going to meet with the representative as well for the representative. In this folder, You can have, program information, who do you serve, what demographics are in your community that you serve, and specific topics that support the research that you already did before this meeting, and then their position on the topic of ECE. Another thing is to, have in mind not to push a political agenda the day of. This is a day to be very collaborative. Share your successes. You can share your challenges as well, but make sure it's not a political agenda. Another things that they can do during the site visit, again, make sure that the staffer knows this when they're scheduling the visit with you, is that they can go ahead and come to the classroom and read a book. Make sure if they're going to do this, that the book is very short and simple for them to be able to be with the children and the family in the classroom. You can also have a separate meeting in your center where parents can meet with the legislator. Another idea is to also, you can post the visit on your program's social media. Make sure that if you take pictures the day of, you let the legislator know, like, hey, we're going to be posting this on our social media. Also be prepared of having maybe a child's drawing, like Eric showed us in the background. Just have it framed. Make sure that you keep names very confidential. You can just write your program's name, and that should be good. They love to post on their office the drawing, so it's a very good gift that they really enjoy. And then last and not least, like Donna say, make sure that you thank them. Thank them for them to come into your visit, for taking the time to meeting with you, with the parents, or reading a book. Just make sure that you don't forget. That piece is very important and they like it. And even in that email, you can attach any pictures that you took that day. And then just a couple of things to keep in mind and to remind is that, again, make sure that you have an agenda and you're prepared, that you have done your research ahead of time. Make sure that you share this agenda with the staffer of the representative. Make sure that you request permission to have the media be at your center prior to alerting the press. Is very important. Like I shared, they don't like surprises. So make sure that you are very transparent and honest with the visit. Make sure that any information that you provide is correct. So if you're pulling information from your community, any data, make sure that is current and correct. And then again, don't push any political agenda. It's a time to collaborate, to get to meet them. Like our colleagues have said, they're your new friends. So just make sure that it's a very smooth visit. Thank you.
What a great opportunity. What a great way to show your elected official the work you do in early care and education, to show off the program and how you make a difference for children and families in your community. For parents, it's a great way to show off, this is the early care and education program that takes care of my child so that I can get to work and get to school and contribute to my community. So it's really a great way to help people, especially those who maybe have never used childcare before, or maybe don't quite understand what early care and education is, to give them the context, right? To really show them in action, this is what we do every day, day in and day out with the children in our program. So whether you're a licensed childcare, or private childcare, family childcare, or Head Start, it's just a great way to show off your context and just how important the work is you do for young children. So we have one more tip to share with you, and it's our pleasure to turn it over to Kylie. She's going to talk us through, well, now that we've had the chance to talk with our legislator and have them at our site, like, how do we tell them about what's important to us? How do we share our story, and how can we make our voice heard for those investments in our care and education? So Kylie, you want to take it away?
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. And like Eric just said, my name is Kylie Barber, and I'm the Early Childhood Policy Director at Children's Action Alliance. And actually, a lot of what I have to say has already been covered. So our panelists definitely know what they're talking about. So I will be brief. I won't tell you things that you already know. But first and foremost, your story is your most powerful advocacy tool. Why your story matters is because legislators are influenced by you. Members of Congress make decisions based on information that they gather from their constituents. Your story helps put a face on early childhood issues and gives it a voice. Real life stories are able to evoke a far more powerful emotional response than just bland facts and figures because it touches our humanities. When you share your story with your representatives and senators, it helps them remember when a decision about early childhood policy is being made, it's affecting real teachers, real children, and real families. Your face comes to their mind. And then next, your story also builds critical relationships with your legislators. As both Monica and Jessica talked about, relationships are key in advocacy. Your personal story forges relationships with your members of Congress so that, again, when decisions about early childhood policies cross their desk, they think of you, their constituent. Legislators are far more responsive to their constituents and are more likely to support a policy proposal when they hear directly from people who live in their district. So by helping your legislator see how it looks from where you stand, you can help improve conditions for everyone who is in the early childhood space. And I will briefly talk about 5 tips about sharing your story. So when you finally have the meeting and you're either sitting in the chair in front of your legislator or in front of their staffer, or you're on the Zoom, again, you know, how do you talk about your story, what things to highlight, and how to frame it so it's most effective. So first and foremost, again, reiterating, do your research and know your audience. I know several of the other panelists have talked about this as well, but consider who is the legislator in front of you. Find personal connections that you have in common. As a constituent, you are from the same state as your legislator. You may live in the same neighborhood, go to the same school, etc. And these commonalities, again, help build the connection and make you memorable. Also, research the issues that are important to your legislator and try to understand their why for going into public office. What do they want to accomplish? You may want to check out their website, press releases, social media pages, and other resources to gain a better understanding of who they are and what their core values are. It's also a really good idea to research legislation that they have supported. Try to consider whether or not this legislator is friendly to the early childhood cause. It's good to consider that before going into the meeting. Are they Republican or are they Democrat? And try to frame your story to cater to their values. As a general rule, Democrats are persuaded by an issue if it is the right thing to do, and Republicans are persuaded by an issue if it is fiscally responsible. So you may want to consider developing a story or a Democrat story as well as a Republican story. You may frame it different. You may frame, if you have a meeting with a Republican, you may talk about the return on investment. If you've got a meeting with a Democrat, you may talk about it's the right thing to do to support children and families and to give them the most resources and the best chance possible to grow up and have optimal adult outcomes. So the next tip is keep your story concise and to the point. You should aim to keep your story around 2 minutes, especially if you are sharing the meeting with other advocates. Present your story in an easy to follow chronological order. Focus on the highlights, answer the main questions, who, what, where, when, and why. You may consider presenting your story in a cause and effect format. I know that this can be really effective as well. And do the math for the legislators. Help them see the issue clearly, help them see the cause of the issue, and then help them understand what this means for teachers, what this means for children and families, and how they're negatively impacted by the issue. The third one is connect with emotion, but don't overwhelm. So the idea here is to tug on the heartstrings if possible. Stories that evoke emotion, again, are powerful, and policy decisions can often be influenced by these compelling stories. If your story brings up powerful emotions for you that cause you to cry, try to strike a balance between delivering the message in a compelling way, but one that doesn't overwhelm you or your audience. And then the fourth tip is pair your story with a policy ask. In my opinion, this is the most important tip. Legislators want to help. That is likely one of the reasons why they ran for office. And legislators can sometimes become frustrated when they hear these compelling stories of their constituents, but there is no solution or way to help. So it's really important to pair your story with a policy or legislative ask that your legislator can take action on, whether it's voting a certain way, co-sponsoring a piece of legislation, etc. Give them something that they can do to help you, help them help you. And then the fifth tip is lastly, and equally probably as important as the fourth tip, is follow-up. I cannot emphasize this enough. Legislators and their staff meet with constituents all day who present different issues all across the board. And really, when it comes to this, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So the onus is on you, the advocate, to follow up. And again, you can build a relationship with that staffer. If you can build a relationship with the legislator, they are more likely to respond to you because they remember you and your story. And I believe that is all I have. Happy to answer any questions anybody else has, but thanks for your time.
Thank you, Kylie. So wow, we've spent some time together looking at 5 easy ways to get involved in early childhood advocacy. First, as we wrap up, I just hope you'll join us in thanking our panelists for spending the time sharing these important strategies to help us really advocate for equitable, affordable access to childcare for families across the state and those worthy wages and public investments to support the early childhood profession. So thank you so much to our panelists for sharing your expertise. We spent some time together looking at 5 specific strategies. Number 1, register to vote and vote. Number 2, do your research and be an informed voter. Number 3, ask your candidates questions about early childhood education. Number 4, host a site visit. And number 5, share your story and make your voice heard. So now that we've explored these 5 strategies, we're going to turn it over to Kelly and Stephanie from the Southern Arizona AEYC, our sister affiliate here in the state, to tell us, well, what do we do now? What are the next steps we can take today, tomorrow, in the next few weeks to make a difference for young children and families? So Kelly and Stephanie.
Hi guys, I'm Stephanie. I am the current president-elect for SAZAEYC. And this is Kelly, the executive director. So some of the few things that you can do today, do tomorrow, are contact your elected officials. Like Monica mentioned earlier, they are real people just like you and me. And sometimes at first it can be intimidating and overwhelming, but you just have to remember they're people like you and me trying to make a difference in our society. And so it's up to us to contact them and tell them what we want. So you can call, schedule an appointment to meet in person. And if all else fails, leave them a message because their secretaries always look at them the next day in the morning, or if anything before the end of the day. So it's always good to leave a message with what you want to say and how to get back to you. And then find and follow your elected officials on social media. Right now, Twitter has become a very big political place in social media where a lot of our politicians are posting and sharing their opinions. So that's some way to kind of get to know them. And also Facebook, Victoria Steele, I follow her on Facebook and she's constantly like sharing what she's working on and what she believes. And that's also a place where you can like comment or message her on Messenger and like tell her what you want her to do for us. And
I'm not quite sure I have anything to add from this evening, but my name is Kelly Larkin. I'm the executive director of Southern Arizona AEYC. I think really the action step is usually the most nerve-wracking. And for many of us, we can remember those days when we were first asked to talk in a meeting to an elected official. And so I just always recommend when I'm asking teachers who are in centers, home care providers, and working with children and families, it's okay to write down what you want to say. It's okay to do it in letter form to help keep you on track. And it's just a nice memento. We've had times where letters have been written and then they've been used for further events or to be sent to those elected officials. Just remembering that our voices are important and really connecting with them is most important. So be brave, find out who your elected officials are and try to take action in like the next few weeks.
Thank you so much, Kelly and Stephanie. So to wrap up, we just want to share with you again that your voice and your story is powerful early childhood educators, child care providers, parents, community champions. All of our voices are important, and when we elevate them together in unison, we can help ensure that children, families, educators, and our communities have the equitable public investments they need, not only to be lifelong learners and have the resources to thrive throughout their life, but to be able to have a vibrant and successful thriving now, because we're living in the now, right, with our children, families, and communities. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this early childhood advocacy webinar. As you complete this webinar, please take just about 5 minutes to complete this brief survey. At the end of the survey on the completion page, there is a link to a PDF version of the certificate for 1.5 hours of professional development. If you include your survey, if you include your workforce registry ID number in your survey response, we'll mark you as attended within 10 business days. And you can access the survey at bit.ly/060722 survey. Once you've completed the survey, there is a place in the survey to also let us know if you want to participate in a story from the field or a virtual interview or maybe a blog post to tell your story and elevate your voice and as a champion. And so if you want to include your information there, we're also happy to reach out if you want extra support with early childhood advocacy. Thank you again for your time, and we'll hope to see you at an upcoming webinar. Thank you.